Okay, hi everybody. Welcome. Hey, we're back. We're doing this again.
Yes, we take a little bit of a break. I think I used this joke last time we were on a bit of a hiatus, but this has the longest stretch of time before new Pierre the Chef episode since the birth of the universe up to episode one.
That's yes, that is true. That is true. So hey, I uh I think you know what I'm going to ask you.
It's not my fault that we didn't do a Pierre for this long.
Well, no, I know it's but I was just going to ask. I mean, especially since it has been as long as it's been. I mean, the last time we
Hmm.
did this show was March. Here we are end of July, right? So
And
here
we had two guests on.
we did, none of
Can,
whom neither of whom were Pierre.
right. Can we blame them for how long it's been? Say they left the show in a mess and it took us this long to get it sorted out.
I am going to
I don't
blame
know. I don't know if that would be fair, but
I
I think we can do that.
I am going to blame Jason.
Yeah, I figured
A
you
hundred
were going to go
percent.
that route.
I would never blame Jess. I love Jess. I would never ever blame Jess for
That's
anything.
because Jess will beat us up.
That's also that. I will blame Jason 100%. But no, my question is, where's Pierre?
Pierre is not
Where the
here.
fuck is Pierre? No,
Uh,
listen, I'm sick of this. Where the fuck is Pierre?
well,
You
to
need
be
to answer. You need no. Hey, listen. Every time we do this show, okay. Every single time we do this show, we do this little shtick at the beginning, and I'm like, "Hey man, where's Pierre?" And you're like, either you don't know, or you tell me where he is, and he's some other fucking place besides being on this show. We're like 6 months into this pandemic, okay, and you know we've done 2 live streams now, counting this one, about this pandemic. Why do we have to be here? And Pierre is just off somewhere doing whatever the fuck he's doing. This is bullshit. I call bullshit on this.
well, to be fair, all of us have perfect attendance.
Yes, that's true. That's true. And maybe Pierre just doesn't want to, to mar that record. But I'm just saying, this is bullshit. You and I have been here for every show. Pierre has never been here.
Yeah,
Now
we even got
shit is
Jason
about to
Jess
get
on once.
Now shit is about to get serious, okay? We're in the middle of a public health crisis that isn't getting any better. And where's Pierre? That's what I want to know.
Well,
I
I haven't
demand
heard-
I demand to know where Pierre is.
I have not heard from Pierre in about a week, but last I heard, he was in Portland.
Pierre's Pierre's in Portland.
That was the last news I got from him. Yes,
Portland.
That's about a week ago.
Portland, Oregon.
That Portland, Oregon. Yes.
Not Portland, Maine.
I'm not sure he even knows there is a Portland, Maine.
There a lot of people
Geography
don't.
is not his strong point.
A lot of people don't, because Portland, Oregon has the quirky little, like hippie dippy, like hipster culture, and they have the show, right? The Fred Armisen show, Portlandia. Like, what does Portland, Maine have? Well, I mean,
A lighthouse, maybe?
Portland, Maine doesn't have unidentified federal troops roaming the streets, but so it's got,
Well, if they're not identified, how would we know?
that's true. They could be sneaking around. So Pierre's in Portland. Well,
Last I heard.
okay. And it's been a while since you heard from him.
Right.
Okay. Well, depending on how that turns out, I may owe him an apology.
You may, but honestly, he owes you enough that you can just, take
does.
one off the
He
list
really
of
does.
the ones that he owes you.
He really does. I mean, God. Anyway, how have you been?
Oh, not too bad. I've been telecommuting for several months. It's a bit different, but I have to admit I will telecommute as long as they'll let me. And I think that the state, because I work for the state of Pennsylvania, I think that the state may find that it's financially advantageous to have a large portion of the workforce telecommuting, because it's probably much cheaper to maintain an internet system for that than it is to maintain buildings in every county in the Commonwealth, and large
Yeah.
buildings for every employee. I mean, right now, a stretch of seats that normally would hold 16 seats, that normally there were like 14 or 12 people in them because, some empty seats. But right now there's 3 because everyone else is telecommuting. My only concern about it is that sort of becomes a barrier to access
Yeah.
if you're applying for a job, but you don't have a computer or internet access.
Yeah.
I mean, you need to be able to have some people who work in the office and who are not rejected for the job for not being able to telecommute, because a computer and reliable internet access is a barrier to access for a lot of people.
Oh, for sure.
I
It's
mean, in my case, I had to buy a new computer to do this, which I'd been meaning to do for a long time anyway, and I kept stalling and stalling and stalling. But when this started, I needed a computer was that was running Windows 10, which my old one was on 7. It also, this is true, because everything business is through Microsoft programs, you needed to have Internet Explorer 10. That's what everything is optimized to run on. I got the new computer and it has Microsoft Edge because they renamed Internet Explorer because it had such a bad rep. So I actually, this is true, had to download an earlier version of Internet Explorer. You know how they say Internet Explorer is the #1 browser for downloading a better browser? I had to use Edge to download Internet Explorer and set it up so that I could telecommute.
Wow.
The things I do for work.
It's probably
But,
situations like that one they're probably the only reason why anybody would ever intentionally download Internet Explorer.
exactly, because I'm shocked that I had to do that. But if it's that or having to go to the office, I will download Internet Explorer because it doesn't. I'll tell you, you don't realize how much of your day is committed just to driving to and from work, and how much time that takes out of your day and traffic, and the money that I'm saving on gas because I don't have to fill the gas tank every week or two.
Oh yeah.
I'm not going anywhere.
Oh yeah.
So time and money savings have actually been there's a lot. This is not a good situation, but I'm trying to find the silver linings, and the time I'm saving, the money I'm saving on gas just going to and from work is a huge part of it.
I do kind of think, and I mean, I don't have any personal experience in this because I don't have a real job, but I do kind of think that after all this is over, whenever that might be, 5 or 6 years from now, probably, that this will be maybe a more permanent change for a lot of companies, because I feel like, this has at least proven that a lot of jobs can be done from home if the proper equipment is in place,
Right.
and yeah, I mean, it's more convenient for workers, and it's almost always, I would think, less expensive for the company, and and it's just like my wife used to work for the public library, and one of her pet peeves was when they would call in-person meetings to tell them stuff that they could have just emailed them, and it was like almost every single time that they called, like a massive, like multi-branch in-person meeting, and it was always just to tell them shit they could have just emailed everybody, and it was baffling. It was like, why are they wasting time and money doing this when you could literally just do it, through telecommunications and save everybody's time and whatever you're spending to organize this thing. So I don't know. I mean, it's not going to be good for everybody. Like I suspect the movie theater industry is probably close to the point of death.
Yeah.
But other than that,
because movie theaters don't make money off of the ticket sales. They make money off of concessions. That's why everything's so expensive, because the longer a movie is in the theaters, the larger percentage of the ticket prices or revenue go to the theater. But it's typical for like the first week of these blockbusters for the ticket revenue to be like 95% to the studio and only 5% to the theater. In fact, I understand when Age of Ultron came out, the studio made some noise about going 100% for the first week, and a number of the major chains said, "No way, we won't even show it if you do that," and they backed off.
Yeah, let's show a movie for free.
But they make most of their money off of the concessions. So
the movie theater industry has been in a rough situation for a long time now, though, especially with the prevalence of streaming media and stuff like that. I mean, where they're in kind of it's a little bit analogous to like the coal mining industry, where like, whenever something occurs, whenever some change looks like it's on the horizon that will threaten them, obviously they oppose it because they want to maintain their industry.
Right.
But that's really the only reason. Like you can sort of tell that like the culture,
The writing is on the wall.
Yeah, the economy wants to move in a particular direction, and you're just holding back the inevitable at this point.
Like here where I live, or near where I live, Jenkins Township had a factory that employed a large number of people. It was called Technoglass, and it manufactured glass picture tubes for televisions. And there's actually some sort of deal. I remember hearing that the music teacher at school actually talked about this, where like one of the Japanese television companies had a contract where they would inspect. They would actually review each tube individually, and this is what I've heard. The music teacher told us, but this is what we were told in school, that the company would test, you would check every tube that came out, and they would reject over 90% of them. They wanted a certain level of quality, and most of them didn't meet it. And then an American television company agreed to use the rest. And the teacher said, you see the Japanese companies' TVs and the American TVs companies, and you can see the difference in the picture because the Japanese company is going by the higher standards. but naturally, nobody does that anymore. I mean, the company is gone. I think the building may be gone too. There's just there's no demand for it, and it's unfortunate, but that's progress. Life moves on, and the same thing's going to happen with the coal industry. They're fighting tooth and nail. And there's all this stuff with all these elections and, Lou digs coal and crap like that.
Yeah.
But I mean, the coal industry nationwide, how many people does that employ? It's something like 50,000 people total?
It's not that, yeah, it's not.
I mean, it's shockingly small number.
Yeah.
And, they have, much like Iowa and the primaries, they have very outsized importance and influence over the whole system.
Yeah, for sure. For sure. Well, it's the old argument of horse-drawn carriage manufacturers. At the dawn of the automobile, it's like technology is developing, the culture is evolving, the economy is evolving. Are we really going to try to subsidize a dying industry just so we can keep it?
Especially when we know that dying industry is playing a large part in literally killing the planet.
Yeah. The coal industry, not the movie theater industry. As far as I know. I don't know what dark secrets are being kept by the movie theater industry, but who knows? Maybe they are behind climate change. I don't know. But
those projectors run off of spotted owl blood. It's the only way they'll
run. but I do think, I think eventually, and I feel like the pandemic has hastened this, but I feel like we were moving in that direction anyway. Eventually, movie theaters are going to be, just like a niche thing.
A novelty.
That are like, they're locally owned, or maybe there are a couple chains, but they don't operate that many.
They'll be like comic book stores are now. And boy, they aren't going to survive, are they?
Well, yeah, exactly. I think that's a really good analogy. It'll be like locally owned bookstores, stuff like that. And they'll still be there. So, eventually we'll have like little mom and pop coal mines, I mean, there won't be like a big, massive corporation. It'll just be, locally owned coal mines in certain towns,
Actually, what'll be left will probably be completely 100% government run. Whatever's left.
That's true.
And then they won't complain about socialism and communism because it's supporting what they wanted to support.
Yeah, exactly. Well, that's as we have seen. That's the way it goes.
There's very little intellectual consistency on the motivations. It's just when what I want continues, it's good. When what I don't want happens, it's bad.
That's exactly it. I mean, that's the only thing they care about. As I think, hopefully, as has been demonstrated, quite effectively over the last few weeks, last few months, really. But I mean, we could go ahead and say last few years. I mean, like ever since Trump took office, it's like,
We can keep going right back to the founding of the country,
well,
but
yeah, but I mean, you know, this whole like the Republican small government, individual liberty, you know, like it's I can't take that much pleasure in it because it's ruining people's lives, their hypocrisy and the way they run this government. But on a purely petty, selfish level, it does make me feel kind of good to see, oh, it was just a fucking pose all along. You know,
right.
they never actually meant a word of it. They got on like their high horse and they got all judgmental and all moralistic and talked about how, you know, oh, we need to have small government so that the people can have room to breathe and, you know, it's tyranny and blah, blah. And they never meant a single word of it.
No,
All
they
they
didn't.
wanted was to be in charge.
And it's very hard to. I've been saying that we've all known right along that this whole right wing libertarianism stuff is bullshit and
Yeah.
so on. But I mean, we're really seeing it now, where they said they need to stand up. They needed guns. They needed freedom to stand up to oppose a tyrannical government.
Yeah.
And now we've got people being taken by government agents in unmarked cars without identification, just grabbing people off the streets and disappearing them.
Yeah.
And it's like no big deal. You know,
This, yeah.
That's-
What?
yeah, I mean, all the things that they said they needed to stand up for, all the things they said they needed their guns for, all of those things are happening now.
It's like that.
And-
It's like that Onion story. NRA accidentally forgets to revolt against authoritarian government.
Right.
You know.
Well, the thing is, basically, people are okay. The people who are okay with this are okay with this because they're under the impression that they will never be the person being loaded into the vehicle.
Right. And at least as long as Trump or people like him are in charge, I mean, you can't, you can't ever have that assurance, because I think Trump himself as a person, and I think people who think the way he does, I feel like that's been demonstrated too, that he has no loyalty whatsoever.
Oh God, no.
I mean, all he knows is self-interest. So if he thinks he can get something by throwing you in front of a train, he'll do it and not even think twice about it.
Might not even think once about
Not
it.
even think, he might just do it. Yeah.
And it's
Yeah.
there's so many. It's hard to know what to say that hasn't already been said about this because of how this is going on and how badly it's been handled. I feel like I should have something more insightful to say, but this has been going on for months now, and it's just getting worse. And
Yeah.
they closed the schools with the belief that things would be settled out by the new school year, and that hasn't happened. It should have been, and if we had any sort of coherent leadership that was encouraging people to behave responsibly, then maybe it would have been. But you did a video recently about a lot of the arguments again about this, and I see things on Facebook and on the internet that sort of point out the other direction, like the stuff we're saying about how it was all nonsense, all this stuff about small government and individual rights and so on.
Yeah.
And some people say that there's one thing going on. It's like, I'm tired of hearing this because obviously they never, this was never the point. That they don't care. I mean, you can point out the hypocrisy, but they don't care because it's not about that. It's not about intellectual consistency. It's just about them wanting what they want, and they don't care how it happens or who gets hurt as long as they get it. And there is truth to that. But I think that it's still necessary to point out the hypocrisy in these things to make it very clear, because as with many things, the audience is not the person who's committing the offense. The audience is people who are considering joining.
Yeah. Well, and there's also, just for your own, I know this is certainly the situation that I have felt myself to be in, especially in terms of the school thing, is like, I talk about it because I don't know what the fuck else I'm supposed to do. I mean, I feel so helpless, and I feel helpless and overwhelmed by all of it. But the school thing especially, because I know so many people who are teachers, who are just absolutely precious people to me, who are people I would not want to not have in my life. And all of them are worried about this. All of them are angry about this. Even the ones that are lucky enough where they are actually teaching in a district where it looks like they're not going to open in the fall. Like my home county somehow figured out that they shouldn't open schools. I don't know how the fuck they figured it out, because this is like Trump country, but they got it right. And so, but even teachers that are in that relatively fortunate position are pissed off because of this. You know, why should any teacher have to do that? Why should any student have to do that? Why should anybody who works in a school system in any capacity have to face that possibility?
Well, the cynic in me thinks that the part of the whole conservative idea is to privatize everything, to put everything where they can profit off of it.
Yeah.
There's been efforts to kill public education in the country for a long time, and that's a lot of the issues that we have with public education in this country come from government slowly strangling it, just like they're doing to the post office now, which is yet another issue.
Yeah.
But this is like a golden opportunity to expedite the process, because this is going to cause potentially, the idea could be that this will push a lot of the more sensible and responsible teachers out.
Which it will.
And this is going to cause devastation of local schools, and then these groups can come in and privatize everything, and now it's, as Mitt Romney said, you should get as much education as you can afford.
Yeah, exactly. But I mean, it's so frustrating, and it's so...
I mean, I want to think that things like that are being, sort of alarmist conspiracy theorists, but considering what we've seen out of this administration, is there really a point where you can say, no, they wouldn't go that far?
Well, yeah, no, of course not. But also, I mean, another thing to keep in mind is it doesn't have to be a willful conspiracy. We've seen that that's the way it works. Whether the Republicans are sitting down at a table and plotting, first we will hobble public education, then we will move into privatize. That's what is happening anyway. And the same thing that's happening with police departments, with jails and prisons, the private prison, for-profit prison. Like, the whole idea is, these have been so mismanaged. We can, if we let some private companies come in and take care of this, we can do it a lot better, And of course, one of the big reasons why state-run prisons are such a nightmare is lack of funding, lack of oversight, a criminal justice system in general that feeds people into prison that don't need to be there or are treated unfairly on their way in. I mean, like, there are all these problems.
Which is where the whole Black Lives Matter issue, which is a huge thing that's bringing a lot of this to the forefront. That's where...
I mean, there are all these problems that Republicans either directly contribute to or want to ignore that are really at the bottom of everything. But instead of dealing with any of that, they say, well, let's just privatize it. That'll fix it. And so I don't know if it has to be part of a conscious evil plan. I mean, maybe it is. Like, I'm not saying it couldn't possibly be, but it doesn't have to be, because that's what happens.
Possibly a couple of people at the top, like the Koch brothers and so on. The Koch brother now. I suppose they
pour out a Coke for the dead Koch brother.
They might be doing that, but I think for the most part, it's just people who are just going along with the flow of what they're hearing and not really thinking about it. Like there's on Main Street going through Jenkins, actually, there's a house that has a Trump 2020 and an America First and a Build That Wall banner all in their front yard. It's like every time I go past, I cringe.
Yeah,
it's like, how can you be that heartless and that clueless?
Yeah, and those are the two necessary conditions, I think. I mean, well,
But you know what? Those are the two conditions that you also need to complain, to respond to Black Lives Matter with All Lives Matter or Blue Lives Matter. You have to not care or completely not understand.
Yeah.
There's really no other options. You don't get it, or you just don't give a damn.
You don't care, yeah. And that's part of why it's so frustrating, and why it's so easy to feel helpless, because I don't know I don't know how to reach people who are still on this bandwagon at this point. And normally
I
I
don't
would
think it's possible.
no, and normally I would say fuck them, don't worry about it. But if they're on school boards, you know what I mean? It's like a school board, and especially in a small, sparsely populated county, a school board is maybe 6 or 7 people. If they are Trumpers, or if they're people who, for whatever reason, whatever their political affiliation, just don't think that this pandemic is that big of a deal and opening schools in the fall is a good thing to do, I mean, you kind of have to reach them. And if you can't persuade them with facts, if you can't just show them a graph of, the 7-day average of new cases and say, look, you see how it's going up like that? Like, if that doesn't work, what can you do? There's
Honestly,
no.
I'm at the point where I don't think if anybody who's watched this country for the last 4 years and still supports Trump, you're not going to reach.
I agree.
What you have to do is reach all the people around them and create the pressure. It's almost like the same thing like in the NFL, Washington, the football team has been known as the Redskins forever, and there's been a lot of issue about that, a lot of complaints about that for a long time.
Forever.
And it finally changed here when if it finally changed when there's pressure, not just from fans, but also from sponsors, that was going to start hitting them financially, and they retired the Redskins name. And because he was so insistent he wasn't going to do that, he made no preparations, and there's basically trademark squatters at all of the names that they wanted. So this year they're going to be known as the Washington Football Team.
Yeah.
That's going to be their official name for this year. And it didn't happen because people got through to Dan Snyder. It's because they got through to the people around the owner. And Shane, although I'll say this, Philadelphia players are Eagles, New York players are Giants. I assume that Washington players will now be football teams.
Yes, the Washington football teams.
So, but I mean, that's a classic example of how you can't get through to the individual, but you can pressure all the people around him.
Yeah, and that is something that's something that has encouraged me. If there's anything during this last 6 months, especially, that has encouraged me, about the school opening thing.
And there hasn't been much.
There hasn't been much. About the school opening thing, and about the Black Lives Matter protests, and I mean, we mentioned Portland at the beginning. Yeah, what's going on in Portland is horrifying because the Trump administration is deploying unidentified federal agents to arrest people without cause, and
basically the Trump administration is doing a lot of things that we cite as reasons to invade other countries.
Yeah, or as reasons to start a war to leave Great Britain. But so I mean, and as awful as everything they're doing is, and it is, it's been very encouraging to see how, especially since the unidentified federal agents started showing up, how every night there are more and more people on the streets. The protests are not getting smaller. The people are not being intimidated by Trump and his goons. They're being energized and emboldened, and seeing how vital it is that they resist.
Well, Trump and his goons have power and authority at this point. They don't have the numbers.
No, not at all. Not at all. And the more they try to push this agenda that is based on a total lie, that Portland and other cities are these lawless hellscapes, where like anarchists are just going around bombing stuff and creating chaos in the streets.
And the people who live in those cities are like, seriously?
Yeah, not the case, not the case at all. And I mean, so much so that, like, you would think, like in Portland, for example, if Portland was really that bad, would they really need to be arresting people who are just minding their own business on the sidewalk? Maybe grab some of these so-called violent anarchists and drag them away in the van if there's so many of them around causing so much trouble.
If they're violent anarchists, all the police would do it.
right. You would think.
Assuming that they aren't the violent anarchists too, because that's been an issue in a lot of fronts.
Well, I don't know how many of them are anarchists, but yeah, I mean, it's nice to see. It's nice to see the wall of moms, and now I saw, this morning I saw, last night there was the wall of vets. because they fucked up the police. It wasn't. They pepper sprayed like a veteran.
Right.
And they fucked up when they did that because now all the fucking military vets are like, oh no, and so now they're out in front along with the moms and the dads.
They also pepper sprayed or tear gassed the mayor.
Yeah, that's right. They tear gassed the mayor. And good for him going out there and standing with the people. I mean,
Yeah.
I don't know a lot about him. I would imagine he's probably not completely blameless in the issues that brought people out in the first place. But I mean, good for him,
Yeah.
And yeah, so that encourages me, like that gives, and
that is good. I mean, the people out there protesting and actually standing up. I mean, that is really good. I mean, there's been a lot that's been said about Black Lives Matter being painted right on the street leading to the White House and then in other places as well. And I'm of two minds of that, because it's a very public statement against the president and for equality. And you can't do a much clearer fuck you to the president than painting that on the street that leads directly to the White House.
Yeah.
Yeah. There are people who say, on one hand, the fact that there's that much support for this is very much a good thing. But the other side of it, which I'm also hearing, which I also agree with, is, if people are trying to create a system that's more equal, more equitable, and they're protesting the killing of Black people and the completely out of proportion stops and arrests and convictions of Black people, and police who are shooting Black people simply saying, I felt threatened, and that's enough reason they can get away with it. And you're looking to try to change that, and the government says, look, we painted words on a road. Well, then taking a stand of so fucking what it's one of those cases where I think that's a very legitimate response. It's
absolutely.
There's a large extent to which that's performative rather than actually substantive. As they said, at one point, over 3/4 of the states had painted Black Lives Matter on the road somewhere, but only one did away with qualified immunity for police officers, which is a much more needed concrete step to solve these problems rather than to say, we got your back. That's actually demonstrating that you're willing to make change to protect.
Well, and that's the problem. I mean, it's if all they're willing to do is just, paint the words on the road, then that doesn't fix anything. I mean, it reminds me of a few months ago when all this started, and there was that scene, and I forget which city it was, but where there was a Black Lives Matter rally, and the police chief got up in front of the crowd and kind of turned himself babyface with the crowd and said, like, we the police, like, we're part of your community too, and we don't want to fight, and we don't want to be.
Yeah, there were photos in a number of cities of police kneeling with protesters.
Yeah, and it's like, and this guy, and he said, I remember he was like the chief of police in this town. I wish I could remember what city it was, but and he said, I want to turn this into a parade. And the people at the time were really supportive. Like, they were chanting, walk with us. And so he got down off of the platform that he was on, and he walked with the protesters. And at the time, it was like, oh, that's great. But then you start to think, well, what did he do after that? And what, by walk with us, did he just think, well, I've got them now, all I have to do is just walk with them and they'll leave us alone? I mean, if you really want to walk with those people, you need to change the things that brought them out there in the first place. Like, you can't just say, hey, come on, guys, let's calm down and let's all be friends. There's a reason why they're out there. And if you are on the police department, you are responsible, at least in some measure, for the things that brought them out there. Especially if you're the chief, even if you haven't personally committed any crime, like, you are the head of a department that has committed these offenses, that has brought these people out.
And there were a number of the cities where those pictures were taken of police kneeling with protesters,
Yeah.
where those same protesters were attacked by police later that night.
Yeah, so it means nothing. It's like, we don't want you to walk with us. We don't want it to be a parade. We want you to fix this.
We don't want performative, we want substantive.
Right, we want you to fix this. And if you're not going to fix it, then we want someone above you to get rid of you and put someone in there who will fix it. And if it means get rid of every cop on the force and just completely tear it down to the ground and start over, then that's what should happen.
Another thing that's come up with all this is with the defund the police, which some people are taking to mean eliminate the police completely, which is not at all what it means, and that's generally another thing where people are intentionally not getting the point.
No, well, because the people who want to abolish the police will say, abolish the police. I mean, they're not shy about it.
Yeah, but that I think would be a very good thing, because the police are expected to do a lot of things that really shouldn't be police work, and a lot of things they are trained to deal with rather definitively when that's not what's called for, shall we say? To put it as delicately as possible. But and I saw something where people said, well, you're talking about turning things over to social services. A lot of minorities don't trust social services either.
Right.
And I'm thinking, that is a very good point. And that has to be dealt with. I think that just because people don't trust the social services either doesn't mean that this is not a battle worth fighting, because there's something very wrong here. And while social services and racism and bigotry in social services will cause problems, it's not necessarily as dramatic or as it's kind of lost how I was going there.
That's all right.
It's the police. I mean, if social services are a problem, okay, that needs to be dealt with. But police being a problem is a problem for every black person every single day of their lives. Anytime they leave their house or even just go out on their own yard or front porch, their lives are potentially in danger. And so that needs to be dealt with. And I don't want to see the potential of, well, let's deal with these other problems too, because that's a way to... The incrementalism is a very valid way of trying to get change. You do little changes and eventually they add up to big changes. That's kind of the way that the anti-abortion movement is trying to get things done.
Yeah.
But it's also the way that gay marriage became accepted in the United States. So there were small pockets or little bits, and then eventually the tide turned. But it went a little bit at a time, and then there was a surge, and it became the law of the land. And incrementalism is a very valid way of getting stuff done, but a lot of people don't trust it for, I would think, good reasons, because it's also used as an excuse not to get things done. Like people say, all right, well, this needs to be done. Okay, we need to accomplish this, but we need to do this first.
Yeah.
And then as long as you make this first something that either can't be accomplished or that you're just not going to bother to try, you've got a built-in excuse not to go any further or help anyone else. You'll see that a lot with the gun laws. Like, well, we have to take care of mental health first. Well, yeah, that's an issue, but setting the standard of 100% perfect mental health before we do anything on gun violence is not a reasonable approach. That's exploiting the concept of incrementalism in order to prevent the thing that you're supposedly working toward.
Yeah. Well, and also I think a lot of progressive people and a lot of people who politically are much further to the left than I am fear, or not necessarily fear, but oppose incrementalism because when we get that, we move forward a step and then we just kind of get comfortable there, and we say like, well, but we took care of that, and it's like, no, there are 100 other steps we still have to do. Right.
Because I'm thinking, if you're somebody who's trying to get the same rights everyone else has, and you see a bunch of steps taken and none of them benefit you, eventually you're going to say, screw incrementalism, I deserve this too. I deserve these rights.
Right. Well, and the other problem is specifically with us in the United States. Like take something like healthcare. And 10 years ago, and yes, it's been 10 years since the Affordable Care Act. At the time, one of the things that helped to sell progressives on the Affordable Care Act was an incrementalist argument. People saying, well, look, this is just the first step. We're not just going to leave it here. We're going to do this and it will improve things and then we'll build on it, from there. And so a lot of people who maybe didn't think it was the best plan, supported it because they thought, okay, well, the journey of 1,000 miles begins with a single step. So we'll do this. And now here we are 10 years later. And two things happened. First, obviously, the Republicans cried bloody murder and tried to destroy it from day one and have never stopped.
Because it's amazing how we're going to take away your health care is a winning argument in a lot of cases. A lot of people say, yeah, I don't want health care. And they'll vote for the person who will take it away. I don't get it.
I don't want to live. I mean, but also,
and apparently, I don't want anyone else to live either.
But also, there were from the other side, and we saw this during the primaries. I think we saw it during the primaries in 2016 and this year. There were the more centrist Democratic candidates who attacked people further to the left than them for wanting to get rid of Obamacare. When what they wanted to do was replace it with something more extensive.
Yeah, so the logical thing to do is look at it, see the parts where it works, and say, "We'll keep those." Look at the parts that don't work, and say, "We'll improve those." You don't throw the entire thing out.
Right, and part of it was Bernie Sanders was always the more progressive candidate who had the best shot at winning, so he got targeted most of it for this. And I feel like Bernie didn't do as good of a job of getting his message across as he should have, because when people more toward the center would attack him on that, they would, and Biden was one of them that did it because he takes a lot of ownership of Obamacare because he was in that administration.
Mm-hmm.
He would say, like, we worked so hard to pass Obamacare and get health care to 20 million more people than had it before, and, et cetera, et cetera. And now Bernie wants to just completely get rid of it and throw it out the window. And it's
no, Bernie wants to get 20 more people on healthcare.
It's like, and I feel like there's the issue of we're the only industrialized country. We're the only country with resources comparable to ours, let's just put it that way, that does not have a proper national healthcare system of some kind. Everybody else has done this. And we are pretending like it's this impossible dream. And I wish that Sanders or somebody on those debate stages would have said, look, why are we pretending like this is so impossible? We're standing here acting like, we can't possibly land people on the moon when we did it. Like, we know it's been done. Why are we acting like we can't?
We did
do
it with
this?
Computers less powerful than what we carry in our pockets.
Yeah,
today.
and it's like, so like, why are we? And the same thing with healthcare. Like, if Great Britain did it in 1948, why can't we do it in 2020?
American exceptionalism. Everyone can do it except us.
Yeah. I mean, so I wish that story had been told a little more strongly, and I wish as the Democratic Party and Biden has shown, as I hoped he would, has shown a little bit more willingness to embrace like more extensive healthcare reforms. He still hasn't come out and said I'm in favor of Medicare for all, but at least it has a mention in the party platform. Not as an endorsed policy, but as like a positive thing.
Although, if it's an endorsed policy, that's going to be meat for the Republican base.
Yeah, I know. But I mean,
which is not necessarily a good reason not to do it. But at the same point, I think we've found that Republicans can be whipped into a furor and act extremely emotionally and nonsensically much easier than Democrats will.
Yeah. Well, so, but I would hope that, Biden loves, one of Biden's go-to talking points for, ever since he became a national figure, ever since he was chosen for Obama's vice president, he loves to go to, hey, come on, we're Americans, we're the United States of America. We can do this. There's nothing beyond our capabilities. I would love to see him do that for healthcare reform. I would love to see him get out on stage and say, you know what? Look at all the other countries in the world. Look at Canada. Look at the United Kingdom, look at Australia, look at Germany, look at all these other countries all around the world that have had the ability to guarantee health care to all of their citizens, where people don't have to worry about going bankrupt or going broke or not getting necessary treatment because they can't afford to pay for it. Look at all these other countries all around the world that have done this and have had it that way as a fact of life that people have grown up in generation after generation. It's just the way it is in their societies. They take care of their people. Why can't we do that in the United States? If we're the greatest country in the world, if we really are the people we believe ourselves to be, why are we acting like this is so fucking impossible? And
we've set up a system that's such a mess that people would rather Uber to the hospital than take an ambulance, because an Uber will cost like $50 and an ambulance can cost you $3,000.
Yeah, exactly. It doesn't make sense.
And here's the question: where is that $3,000 going? Who pockets that?
Not the ambulance drivers.
No.
I'm pretty sure paramedic is not that well paying of a position. Yeah, it's outrageous, and there is no reason why it has to be this way. And
this is sort of it's the unfettered capitalism where everything is how can you make a buck off someone.
Yeah, exactly. And
what happened? I mean, remember. I don't know if remember is the right term, but there used to be an adage in business that land always goes up. The value of land always goes up. Land never crashes. Property is something that, locally you can have ups and downs, but overall, property, owning land, that is going to do nothing but improve. It's going to do nothing but increase in value. And that has stopped happening because somewhere along the line, they realized that if you get them when they're in college and you can put them in a mortgage worth of debt before they're even out of college, then you can get the money earlier.
Yeah.
And so people have so much debt that they can't get the houses, and property values are falling in a way they never did before, because people never used to be 22 years old with $100,000 in debt and no property.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I don't know. It's frustrating because, we see there are, and it's you're like,
it's so broken.
Well, and it's like
so many ways.
And it's like most of the other countries in the world that we're talking about that have healthcare or that have, subsidized childcare or other things, more accessible higher education than we have. Like all of these problems that we are still dealing with, like almost all of them are capitalist economies. They're not like proper textbook definition socialist countries where, the means of production are publicly owned. And I mean, most of them are.
Well, no, that's more communism than socialism.
Well, but most of them are. My point is, most of them are capitalist economies. They're just far more heavily regulated, and the government, has a role in assuring that people are taken care of at a baseline level, so that you don't have the same degree of exploitation and income inequality and all these other things that we have. It's frustrating because you see that you don't need a revolution to fix a lot of this. I know like a lot of my friends on the left who call for, who call for a revolution, who want to see, a complete revamping of our society into a socialist society, like a proper, workers own the means of production socialist society. And I mean, I'm not like, I don't have a lot of disagreement with them about the problems of capitalism. Like I'm not gonna but my frustration is I see ways it could be fixed or at least greatly improved without having to go as far as socialist revolution, and we're still not doing it. It's attainable. Like I feel like when you start talking about like, oh, let's have a revolution, that to me is like saying let's go live in the Andromeda galaxy. Like it feels so far off and so impossible, and
in a way it's almost a surrender.
Yeah, and so difficult to actually practically accomplish in a way that would yield something positive and lasting on the other side. And it's like we can address so many of these problems through doing what other countries have done.
roadmap is already there.
Yeah, and we just aren't
wasn't
doing
that one
it.
of the things in one of Michael Moore's movies where he was going to different countries and seeing what they were doing, how they were handling problems better than we were,
Oh
and
yeah.
most of them said the blueprint for this was laid in America. We're following what you used to
What
do.
we used to do. Well, it's not. I mean, like we talk about. There's all this fucking bullshit about
But then
patriot.
it's like deregulation because you need smaller government. Well, government isn't there to control your life. Government is there to protect you from other people.
Yeah, yeah. Government government should be a servant.
If government isn't
And
protecting the people, then what's the point of the government?
yeah, and if government is a servant, then it's not as much of an issue of how big it is, because it should be as big as it needs to be to fulfill its duties. And I mean, Thomas Paine said that the government should be as big as it needs to be, and if people start to carry out some of the services that we previously needed the government to do, well, okay, then the government can shrink. But as long as there are needs that only the government can fulfill, the government needs to be big enough to fulfill those needs, whatever they are. It's not a matter of like, and I mean, it's especially bitter now that we've seen proof that they don't even mean it. But I mean, the whole Republican thing of like, well, government has to be small. Well, but why? Well, just because. Like it's like an axiom to them. It's like I don't need to explain it. Obviously, a smaller government is better. Oh, okay. Like you don't need to provide any evidence as for why. Like what if I'm a poor person, why would I rather have a small government than a large government? Like what they see everything as like a thought experiment of like, well, but what about my personal liberty? And I said, well, what good does your hypothetical personal liberty do you when you're fucking starving to death?
Well, like I said, the whole libertarian and largely the conservative position seems to be a belief an unwavering belief that you deserve all of the rights of being part of a civilization and culture without meeting any of the responsibilities of it.
That's it.
that the society owes you, but you don't owe anything back. You, as long as you're taking, you're good.
That's it exactly. It's a one-way street.
That's a whole mask thing.
Yeah.
I mean, all you have to do is wear a mask, and people won't do it because they aren't willing to go that far to responsibility to other people.
Well, and it's this. There's a childishness to it. There's the well, I don't have to. Like when you were a kid and maybe, you were like, you got tired of your parents telling you what to do and you assert your independence and you say, well, I don't have to, go clean your room. I don't have to go finish your plate, finish your dinner. I don't have to, and like you have nothing to back that up. It's just, you're just childishly asserting your independence. And, I feel like that's a lot of what it is, too. There's a lot of childish, just undirected resistance of just, well, telling me to wear a mask. I don't have to wear a mask. I don't have to do what you tell me to do. Okay, well, 150,000 people are dead, but whatever, you do you.
Yeah, they said the number of cases in the United States up to 4 million, so 1% of the population has caught it already.
Yeah, isn't that nice?
Yeah. I thought this was going to simply go away when it got warm out. Remember that?
Oh my God! Remember when he said, "Oh, in April, right? It'll go away in April," and this motherfucker is still saying it. He's still in the Chris Wallace interview when Chris Wallace said, do you still believe that it'll just go away? And he said, "Eventually, I'll be right."
So there was an article on CNN. It's like the 55 most. 55 basically it's 55 things that Trump said that were wrong or shocking in some way. I'm like, if you have to list 55 of them as the most, then basically I didn't even read the article because I just figured every word out of his mouth is a lie.
Like, that's not. I love that it's the 55 most. This isn't even the whole list. These are just the top, and we couldn't even pick 50. We had to throw in 5 more because we were like, no, that one has to be on the list. We did 55. Yeah, it's, oh God.
It's
Hey,
I've said for a long time, if you had written a story about this administration as a fiction 10 years ago,
yeah,
it would have been considered too ridiculous to publish.
he he did pass that dementia test though,
And he is so
so there's
proud of
that.
that. He is so proud of that.
It's like being proud of passing a cholesterol test. I mean, like, first of all, you don't pass a cholesterol test. You take it and you get a particular result. And I feel like this cognitive test is a very similar situation where it's like it's not like you get like a gold sticker if you don't have dementia. It's a diagnostic tool.
Yeah.
And I mean, it's not like they put it up on the refrigerator. Like look at Donald. He got 100 on his cognitive test. Like
I read somebody said the only thing about that that's good is that they'll be able to cite that he's competent to stand trial.
Yeah, exactly. Oh yeah. Hey, I heard you passed a cognitive test, so get up there.
But yeah,
Yeah.
he's acting like a man who knows that the end is near and that if he doesn't win this election, he's going to prison.
Yeah. Oh God, I hope that happens. I hope.
This entire administration is just rotten to the core.
He said he said that if Biden wins, he said that he probably wouldn't go to the inauguration. I hope it's because he's in hiding.
Mm-hmm.
I hope it's because he's like barricaded himself in Trump Tower and the feds are outside.
Didn't he say he wanted to throw out the opening pitch at the one game, at the Washington Nationals game or something?
I was going to mention that
because he didn't do that in the past because he didn't want to get booed, but now there's not going to be any fans there.
Well, I heard because Fauci threw out the opening the ball at opening day, bit of a wide pitch.
But didn't they say that it's his job to make sure that nobody catches anything?
I saw that. People were saying that on Twitter like immediately, and I loved it. They were like, "Hey, man, this guy really doesn't want anybody catching anything." But yeah, I heard Trump. He apparently is planning to throw out the first pitch at a game coming up soon. I'm not sure if it'll be a Nats game or something else, but and he said something like a reporter asked him like, what if the players are taking a knee, at the game where you throw out the first pitch or something like that, and Trump said, well, they better not do it when I'm there. So I'm like, please do it while he's there. Please do it while he's there. Please take a knee. Have the players on the field during the first pitch and have them all taking a knee with their backs turned to him while he's fucking doing it. Like, I mean, because, some of the teams have put Black Lives Matter on the bases.
Yeah, MLB, BLM.
Yeah. I mean, so, like,
yeah.
I feel like they've already kind of committed to it. So when the guy who has tried to paint Black Lives Matter activists as terrorists and traitors comes to throw out the first pitch, let him fucking hear about it, or let him take a knee in front of him. Refuse to shake his fucking hand. Like, why is anybody extending this motherfucker the tiniest bit of courtesy? I do not understand. Everybody should be treating him like he is an unwanted, unwelcome person. He should not be shown the least bit of respect. He should not be given the least bit of consideration. I mean, I don't think the team should even let him throw out the pitch. If he wanted to throw out a first pitch, they should have said, no, we don't want him.
I agree with you completely about Trump, but that's before we even mentioned Vladimir Putin. It's just, oh man, it's just, if you still support this man, you just don't care. It's like, you don't care as long as he's hurt. There was that article, this was in the New York Times about a year ago, that at the end of the interview to people who had voted for him that were not as enamored of him anymore, had said something to the effect of, it ended with this fantastic quote where a person said, he's not hurting the people he's supposed to be hurting.
Yeah, exactly.
And that's what it is in a nutshell. It's, I don't like these people. I want them hurt. Trump will do it. That's all I care about. And again, that's not something that you can reason with. That's something that you have to deal with the people around them and make it shameful to be racist again, make it shameful to be homophobic and things like that. Because people who think that way and whose goal is to see other people suffer, you're not going to reason with them.
No. No, well, I think you can't reason someone out of a position that they didn't reason themselves into. I feel like that's something we used to say as atheists talking about religious people. And now it turns out it's that we should have been instead of worrying about arguing with religious folks, we should have been worried about
Our own house.
our own house and right wing people regardless of how religious they were, because that's the real danger. I mean, there are plenty of deeply religious people who are also very progressive and very humanistic and why the fuck would I ever want to start an argument with you over the existence of God when we're on the same side? We should have been focusing our attention on the real threat to us and to everybody, but.
But yeah, too many atheists took the stand of, well, we got the answer to the question about the existence of God correct, therefore we're correct about everything.
We're geniuses. Yeah.
Atheism is in many ways just as toxic as religion.
Oh, absolutely. And it's just it's there are parallels between like the toxic parts of atheism and Trumpism, because both offer a shortcut to something that is actually really hard. Like with atheism, I think a lot of the appeal to people, especially to young men, was, you can feel really smart without actually being smart. You can learn a list of logical fallacies and you can learn the arguments against, common arguments for the existence of God. You can learn how to point out double standards and inconsistencies in the Bible and feel like you're really super smart, and actually you're not. You've just learned a couple of tricks.
Yeah, a number of friends that I made online back before social media and Facebook and all of that. Some I'm still in contact with. One, James Honey does a trans globalist we've talked about occasionally. And I met them on a discussion board that was maintained by somebody who was one of these. He was an atheist, but he was kind of a coward about. Basically, he liked to troll people. What he wanted to do was try to draw in the extreme religious people, and he knew a whole lot about a very narrow bit of the Bible and certain religious beliefs, and he would bring in people who would argue on those points, and then he would just hammer them. But that was all he was interested in doing.
Yeah,
he wasn't advancing anything. He wasn't discussing anything. He was trying to bring in people and then just bash them. And it took me a while to realize, because I didn't really understand what was going on at that point.
Right.
A bit younger, but yeah, I mean, basically he was an intellectual coward who was just trying to find unprepared fundamentalists to tee off on.
Yeah, exactly. And
that's not smart. That's not that's a power trip.
Yeah,
that's not intelligence.
It's being a bully, and it's being a bully, but it's trying to make a virtue out of it by saying religion is a threat, and I'm fighting a dangerous ideology, and I'm fighting for reason and for science. And really, it's like, are you though? I mean, are you? Like, I mean, because I'm 100%.
That Thor meme, but really?
Yeah, exactly.
Are you really?
But are you though? Is it really? Yeah, I mean, it's just, and it's like, yeah, we were right that creationism and intelligent design shouldn't be taught in schools. We're 100% right on that. But if we really care about education, we should also be supporting teachers' unions and fighting for, increased funding to public education. Like, you can't just be like, well, I proved those creationists wrong. I've done my bit for science education. No. If you really care about that, like, there are problems that go way beyond whether or not they're teaching Bible stories in science class. Like, yes, that is a problem. But if you really care...
It's not the big problem.
Yeah.
That's an effect, not the cause.
Yeah, Yeah.
Oh, boy. So the
So
world is
anyway.
on fire. The world is a raging dumpster fire right now.
Everything is terrible.
Especially the United States, more than any other country, because every other country took this whole coronavirus thing seriously, and we were like, it'll be fine.
Yeah, it's funny how even how like the Australians and the New Zealanders and the Japanese and the Germans and they were somehow able to handle their pandemic a lot more effectively than we have, despite the treachery of the Chinese. Like, that's Trump's whole thing. Trump's whole thing is like, well, they lied to us, the Chinese, it's their fault. It's like, okay, but what about every other country that has done a better job than we have?
Well, other countries don't have a tantruming 6-year-old in charge.
Well, that's true, but I don't know if that would be part of Trump's. That wouldn't be part of Trump's answer. Look, it's my fault.
Those are words that have never even entered his head.
I don't. Yeah, he's never even thought that. He's never even had the inner voice going, maybe I should say this is my fault. Like, it's never ever happened.
When he was running the first day, they said he's a dumb person's idea of what a smart person looks like. He's a weak person's idea of what a strong person looks like.
Exactly.
He's a failure's idea of what a success looks like.
Yeah, exactly. And I don't know if you saw. Did you see the clip from the Barbara Walters interview?
No.
It's been making the rounds on Twitter the last couple of days, and it is extraordinary. It's from 1990, and so he was just coming out of like his first sort of phase of bankruptcy, right? And he's being interviewed by Barbara Walters, and she is like fact-checking him and cutting him off when he tries to start spinning bullshit, and confronting him with fact after fact that completely discredit the narrative he's trying to push. And I mean,
like actual journalism,
and the startling thing is that she is treating him 30 years ago when he was just some famous rich asshole. She's treating him the way reporters ought to be treating him now as the president, and aren't. But also, his act is completely the same. It's every time anybody challenges him or contradicts him, it's, oh, you're being so unfair to me. Oh, your reporting is so dishonest. Oh, people are going to watch this and they're going to see how dishonest you're being. And they're going to see how unfair you're. Like, he defaults then and now to woe is me, pity me, I'm the victim, everybody's lying about me. People are going to see how bad you are to me. People are going to see you picking on me and they're not going to like it. And it's like, there was this great, it ends. It's just like,
he's really never been in a position in his life where people could tell him no.
Well, no, I mean, there's,
and he's having a lot of trouble dealing with it now that he's in government and there are checks and balances and that there are people who are able to tell him no.
Exactly. Well, yeah, I mean, at the end of that Barbara Walters clip, he goes off because Barbara Walters makes it clear during the clip that she has actually spoken to his bankers, right? So she knows from the people he owes the money to. She knows what the story is, right? And he's still trying to filibuster and bullshit and say, well, it's not. He said, well, it depends on which one of my bankers you talk to. Okay. But then he starts going off. He starts to try to do the thing that he still does today as president, where he starts to go off on a tangent and deflect the conversation in another direction. And he said, like, well, like, you can look at my Trump Plaza property. Back when I bought it, people said that I overpaid for it. And now everybody's saying that it's a good investment. And Barbara,
who is everybody?
Well, he said that. And Barbara Walters immediately responds, no, they're not. And that's the end of the clip. That's where they chose to cut it. I'm like, oh my God, that's perfect. Now people are saying that actually Trump was right. No, they're not. Like, you are the biggest bullshitter in the world. Nobody's saying that. So, yeah.
And that concludes our unofficial 5 minutes of Trump.
Yeah, I mean, he's kind of been snaking in and out of the whole thing, but...
Yep.
Yeah.
Oh, man. So, are we? Have we covered the dumpster fire that is current events pretty well here?
I don't see. Yeah,
we have Hurricane Hannah coming ashore in Texas as we speak, so that's happening.
Yep. Throw that on the pile. That's just one more thing. This is one more thing. hurricanes. That's what. Fuck it. We'll have some floods. We'll have some more fires. Fuck it. Bring it on. Pile it on. Come on. Pile it on.
Can we have fires and floods at the same time?
Hey, that would be interesting.
Actually, before government regulations started doing some things about pollution, the Great Lakes routinely caught on fire.
So that's how close are we? I mean, that would be if Trump gets reelected by the end of the second term. We'll have burning Great Lakes, and then he'll go and give a speech in front of it and be like, "Do you see how beautiful the fire is? We're the only country in the world that has flammable lakes."
If and I certainly hope it doesn't happen. I believe it won't happen. But if Trump gets a second term, by the end, he's going to be as out of it as Reagan was.
Oh my God. Well, I feel like the thing is, I mean, Reagan was out of it enough that that a couple years later, when it turned out he had Alzheimer's, like nobody was surprised, but I don't remember it being as much of an issue as it is for Trump now. I mean, because Reagan was like a little absent-minded, and there were stories about how like he would fall asleep during meetings and stuff like that. But when Reagan was like out in public, in front of cameras, talking to reporters, he was usually pretty on the ball.
He could pull it together.
Yeah, I mean, he wasn't
what we see of Trump is as together as he ever gets.
Exactly. This is as good as it gets.
As you said, I mean, his shtick was exactly the same, 30 years ago.
Yeah, and he's never seen any. He's never had any reason to change it. It's just like you were saying earlier about how nobody ever tells him no. I mean, he's doing the exact same act as he's always done because
it's always worked for him.
It's always worked for him, and it works for him as president, not because he's good at anything, but because he has this Republican Party around him that are gonna just let him get away with it. Because they think there's some benefit to them. So he has no reason to change. Like I saw an interview. I think I saw Mary Trump was on Colbert to talk about her book, and Colbert asked her, "Do you think at this point that there's any helping him?" like just look at it like as a psychiatrist. Do you think that if he went to therapy that it would do any good at this point? And she said no. Like she said, I feel like he has lived so long in this consequence-free environment where he gets everything he wants and nobody tells him no, and nobody has ever been able to challenge him in any real way, that at this point he's just a lost cause. Like, he's 74. I mean, it's like that's it. Like he is what he is. There's no changing him, He's a complete loss of a human being, basically.
Basically, he is.
That's what he is. He's a complete. He is one of all the people that are known, that are public figures. I think he's definitely the most failed human being, and he's probably one of the most failed human beings walking the planet right now. I mean, the only thing that gives the impression that he isn't is his celebrity. If he wasn't so famous, you would look at that guy and you would think, what a pathetic failure of a human being. No empathy, no real friends, seemingly no connection whatsoever, even to his own family.
An average person who behaved the way that he does could not maintain a job at an Arby's.
No, of course not. He doesn't. What skills does he have? He has no skills. He has no talents. Everything he says he's good at, he's manifestly awful at. Like, all you have to do is watch him and look at the results. He says, like, oh, I make deals. He doesn't. He makes terrible deals. He's so easily manipulated. Like, he's bad. He's so bad at the thing that he has built his entire identity around.
Well, this is what happens when you run the government as a business, because the government and a business are two different things. People keep treating that as some positive thing, like, well, they have business experience. They're going to run the government as a business. The government is not a business. It has different functions, has different purposes. It should not behave as a business. One of the things that has been said about pandemic and how unprepared we were for it was that there were large medical stockpiles. And a lot of that was George W. Bush's doing, because shortly after September 11th, there was a whole anthrax scare and things being sent through the mail. And there was big concerns about bioterrorism. And George Bush, give him credit. I mean, he stockpiled a lot of things that would help with situations like that, and a lot of equipment, a lot of just to prepare, a lot of things that would help prepare for a situation like we're facing now.
Yeah.
And my understanding is that most of that was sold off by Trump because, like a business, if you're not using an asset, you sell it off to make a quick buck.
Yeah.
And a lot of that just evaporated because they got rid of it because they didn't need it right now, because that's how a business works, not how a government works.
Yeah. Well, it's the same way, the way he talks about the military and the way he talks about other countries owing us money because we have military bases in their territories. Like, we have we have military bases in Germany. The Germans don't pay us. We're not mercenaries. The United States military should not be a mercenary for hire force. They're not the A team. They're the United States military. The reason, theoretically, we have them over there because it's in our interest to have them over there. So they don't owe us anything. They owe us, like, we owe them. They're letting us have a base in their country. Like, they don't owe us anything. But he has this mindset. Everything is transactional. Everything is,
everything from business to personal relationships.
Everything. There's no such thing as a non-transactional relationship to him. Everything is, if I do this for you, then you automatically owe me. There's no such thing as mutualism. There's no such thing as, it would be to both of our benefit if we do this particular thing. It's no, I do this, you give me that much money, or you give me that in exchange.
And the moment somebody does something that isn't immediately what he wants, or isn't immediately supportive of him, that person becomes an enemy and gets thrown under the bus.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah.
Which is why the turnover in this administration is hysterical to the point of being tragic.
I mean, it's one of if you can divorce yourself from the real life horror of the last couple years, I mean, it's one of the most fun games to play, is to look at what Trump said about someone when he hired them, and then look what he said about them when either they quit or he fired them. Because he did it with Mattis, he did it with Sessions. I mean, it's
people
like
go from greatest and super qualified and best ever their position to a total dog and somebody no one would ever trust.
Oh, exactly.
In 6 months.
Yeah.
That.
Yeah. Tillerson, all of the major cabinet figures.
Scaramucci became a unit of time.
Yeah, exactly. Like, all of the major cabinet figures who left, when he hired them, it was, world class, best in the world, respected by everybody. He said General Mattis was one of the great generals ever. And now he's a loser. He's a terrible leader. Nobody liked him. It was good that and he didn't actually fire him, but he says he fired him. I mean, it's like, you're on TV, right? Like, we see this. We know it hasn't even been that long. It's been like 2 years. You said he was the greatest guy who ever lived, and now he's like, he's an asshole. The failed
impeachment cemented in his head that he can do no wrong and there will be no consequences.
Well, that's a big part of it. That's a big part of it. It reinforces what he already thought, which is that I can do whatever I want.
Yeah, he knows that no matter what he does, Republican Mitch McConnell will have his back and will not hold him accountable for anything.
Yeah. Yeah.
Unless he starts being, reasonable to black people, then they'll turn on him.
Well, I don't think there's any worry that that's going to happen.
No.
Yeah. So anyway, what have you been doing that's fun? Have you watched anything? Have you read any comics?
I have mostly been. Honestly, I get out of the house so little now. I've been playing more video games, which is not really scintillating conversation. I did finally see Star Trek Discovery Season 2 and Star Trek Picard. Some months ago.
Yeah, that's right. It's been so long since we did one of these fucking things.
It was right after we did the last one of these, and I saw it. So now I don't remember them nearly as clearly as I did at the time.
Well, just general impression. We don't have to go episode by episode because God knows I've talked about it enough for 20 people. But
I thought Discovery. I thought this season was a bit better. It did a better balance of not being so relentlessly grim and dark in every way.
Definitely.
Because I think that was sort of what they were going through in the first season, or what they were aiming for, but they really overshot their mark.
Yeah.
And I think that they made a conscious effort to not go that route this time, to be a bit more positive and upbeat and hopeful and have like lighthearted moments and stuff. And I think that definitely came across. It was another season where they they threaded the entire season, sort of serialized it.
Oh yeah.
There were sort of standalone episodes, but then those things would come back and become a big issue later.
Yeah. Yeah, there were maybe if I remember, there were 2 episodes in season 2 that were more or less standalone, and I think there was only 1 in season 1. So they're getting a little better at doing standalone episodes.
The episode with the was it the sentient planet or asteroid or what it was that I thought was a fantastic standalone episode, and it turned out to come back and be a big thing later on.
Oh, it became the story for the second half of the season. Yeah.
I think that there were a couple of things that it's so much easier to talk about the negative and the positive, but I thought they really did a good job with the season. I still wish that they didn't rely so heavily on things that they've already done. For a show that whose tagline has always been "where no man has gone before," or "where no one has gone before." Mm-hmm. They certainly do go back to the well really often. I mean, I knew Pike was coming back, but did we really have to see Talos 4 again? Like, really? Really?
I thought that was cool, though. I didn't mind seeing Talos 4 again.
Yeah, but
I agree.
It's such an obvious well to go back to. It's the one thing. It's the one mission he was ever on. The one planet we ever saw him. Let's send him back.
I think I'm hoping with season 3, since they threw them into the future in season 3, that's sort of their way of removing that temptation and saying okay, now we have to make up some new shit.
Season 1, they said we're doing a prequel. Season 2 was how do we get out of the traps of doing a prequel? Yeah. Well, the final battle in the last episode, an episode-long battle, I understand from a TV standpoint why they did some of the things that they did, but it did sort of throw off the sense of timing and urgency when people pause and they have to get in the shuttlecraft and get out and take care of these problems. But let's have a 5-minute heartfelt conversation, warm connection moment in the shuttle bay before we take off, because it's so urgent that we can pause and do that. I understand from a TV standpoint why you do that and why it's important for the characters, but it really disrupts the sense of urgency you're trying to portray when people can just stop and talk in the middle of the battle.
Yeah. I mean, And
I would say one other thing that bothered me was the whole bit about the unexploded torpedo in the saucer section. Okay, first of all, the whole concept of it's going to destroy the ship, but if we can get this bulkhead to lower 4 more feet, we'll be fine, is kind of a hard sell in my head. But also, just from I guess we say a strategic standpoint, people will believe the impossible but not the improbable.
Right.
That you can get away with doing things that are completely ridiculous, but you do something that's hey, it wouldn't work that way because it's improbable. If you're in the middle of this huge battle and you've got the threat of the elimination of the human race, and you've got the automated the Section 34 ships attacking and automate someone. If you have one admiral and one captain, you do not put them alone in the room with the unexploded photon torpedo when one shot can hit it and kill. You do not put the 2 ranking officers in the room with the bomb.
Yeah, I think we're a little far along in the whole Star Trek thing to be making that complaint, though, when we know that the captain leads the away team to all the dangerous planets, and it's been that way for the last 50 years. I mean,
but overall, I liked it. Just even little character moments of Pike talking, just the casual thing about the religions of some of the people he'd known. It was like a throwaway comment.
Yeah.
But not only was it giving a little bit of lighthearted background, but how often has Star Trek explicitly mentioned religions before?
Very rare. Well, Earth religions almost never. I mean, almost never.
That was something that Babylon 5 made a point of, that religion is not going to go away just because we're in the stars.
Right. It's going to adapt, just like the rest of our culture will, and But
I mean, I thought that, and I think that going to the future and then the throwaway line is we must never talk about this. it was basically the whole thing of a prequel being either sort of a mistake or something they played so badly that they had to
Well, yeah.
throw a Hail Mary to get out of it.
I think that was. I mean, I didn't have a problem with it because I didn't have a problem with the issue that it was meant to address anyway. You know what I mean? Like I feel they put that scene in of everybody saying like we will never speak of this again. You know, they put that in to satisfy the people who were like, well, but if all of this happened before Classic Trek and it was so important, then why didn't we ever hear about it? And that is
It's
not
sort of a silly.
it's a silly complaint because it's like you know why they didn't hear about it because this didn't exist until now because this is all made up. This is all, you know, like this is fiction and you know that, so stop being a jerk. So I didn't have a problem with it anyway. Like that was never, just like I never, and I think we've talked about this before when we talked about season 1 of Discovery. Like it doesn't bother me that everything looks different. And I'm not waiting for an explanation for that. I don't need one.
Yeah.
It's a TV show. They made it up. It looks different.
And my headcanon on this is that this is timeline 3, but everything happened exactly the same as timeline 1. It just looks different.
See, it's like, I don't even need that. I don't even need that. I'm just like, it's made up.
Enough.
It's made up.
Although, I'll tell you, it also looks better, too, because
Yeah.
if you had gone onto the Enterprise bridge that they built in 1966, it doesn't really look right by today's production standards, and they did.
No.
You said they did a fantastic job, and they did. And I'll tell you, one of the things, the differences that with just production-wise, what you can do, in the past, you wouldn't put, like, light sources on camera because it'd throw off the white balance. You couldn't film on that.
Right.
Now, goddamn, everything is lit up. The wall panels are lit up.
Yeah.
The ceiling is lit up. The floor is clear and lit up. You have clear panel. I mean, they went onto the Enterprise bridge, and the handrail that goes around the center
It's illuminated.
it has lights in it.
Yeah.
Everything is lit up, which you couldn't have done that in 66 because the technology wasn't there. If you lit it up, you couldn't film it.
Yeah. No, I mean, the Enterprise...
Although the one console that has the spigots that shoot up flames seem a little bit unnecessary.
Why do we have this? Why is this even here?
This is the immolation station.
It's like on...
No, it's fine. Go ahead.
It's like
we forgive you for...
It's like on TNG when you could tell when they were like in a really, really serious battle when like not only would the consoles explode, but there'd be like chunks of stuff fly out.
Yeah.
Like there'd be like rocks. I'm like, why are there fucking rocks behind the console on the Enterprise? But you know,
it's what they had to serve as debris.
Yeah.
You weren't supposed to think too close about
it.
Right.
Exactly. It's just like, oh, it seems serious now. But yeah, I thought the Enterprise bridge set on Discovery is one of my favorite Star Trek sets ever now. I just think it's so beautiful. And it's one of the reasons why I was so happy to hear that they picked up a series about Captain Pike's Enterprise. Because I want to see that set again.
Yeah. Which of course will people be all the same complaints. How come we never heard about this? Because it happened a decade before and it's not important.
Yeah, it's like just
enjoy the episode.
Just enjoy the goddamn show. Jesus.
They're making Star Trek again, and they're doing a good job on it. Don't get hung up on all the details.
Just shut up. He's like, just look. I know. Okay, Alex Kurtzman helped to make the Transformers movies. Okay, so drag him all you want for that. But like, he's not doing that bad of a job on Star Trek. Jesus Christ. Is it perfect? No, of course not. Do I have problems with it? Yes, I do. Do I hate it? No. Am I looking forward to the next one? Absolutely. I
must say, I wasn't really enamored with the person they had playing Spock. I thought that the person playing number 1 was actually really good in that role.
Oh, she's great. Spock won me over by the end. Yeah. I was a little iffy on him at first, but he won me over by the end.
Yeah. Number 1, she was able to be deadpan without being emotionless and distant.
Yeah.
Yeah. You could tell that she wasn't just bad at acting.
Right. You know? She was playing a character. Not right. She wasn't just not showing emotions.
And I thought that she did. I thought she was really good at that. And just the very matter of fact way that she would just be like, oh, I've already refitted the shuttlecraft in case the shit hit the fan. Just like it's the most natural thing in the world to have been prepared for this and just go with it.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
But I really thought that it was a much better season overall. For however weird the time travel effect was, I thought it was really distinctive and really good. When each time that Michael would activate the thing and go back and appear again, there was that effect, like that repeating pattern effect.
Yeah.
I thought that was really unusual, but it was really distinctive and it worked pretty well. Which try to come up with a new image like that works for television can be really difficult, without making it look silly. But I thought it's a little thing like that stands out because it's so picture,
Mm-hmm.
and
Yeah.
I kind of like that effect. I mean, the whole thing of it eventually being circular or predestination paradox. It's like, okay, I got no problem with that. I mean, it's not what I would have hoped for, but it works.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, one of the flaws I think with Discovery and with Picard so far, and we can talk about Picard after I finish this point. But like, I feel like they have both relied very heavy on mystery based plotting, where they hold off on revealing the mysteries until the end of the season. And I feel like when you do that, you are really banking on how satisfying the solution is going to be. So because they didn't wait until the very end, like, to reveal what the deal with the Red Angel was, but it was, I think, past halfway in the season when they finally figured out like what the Red Angel was and what the deal was with everything. And when you wait so long to pay that off, like, if it's a really awesome, satisfying payoff, that's fine. But if it's not, then you've made people wait for,
The
10
more you build
episodes.
something up, the further you have to fall.
Yeah, and I feel like Picard.
It's sort of the story of the last season of Doctor Who too, but we won't go into that because you haven't seen it.
I feel like Picard fell into that trap a little bit too, because they built up all these mysteries about, like, where did Soji come from, and why do the Romulans want to kill her, and what's all this about, and then they finally, like, in the last 2 episodes, they finally start paying that off, and it's like, oh,
it's too late.
Okay,
you have to care for the previous 8 episodes.
Yeah, and it's like, no matter what it is at that point, it's going to be a little bit of a letdown, because you're like,
one thing about Discovery. Go back to that for a thing, and I forget the character's name, so I apologize. They killed off the chief medical officer in the first season, and then brought him back in this one.
Oh yeah, Colbert.
Thank you.
Yeah.
And I think that was them correcting what was pretty much a mistake. They say this is the first openly gay character we've ever seen on Star Trek, and one of them's black, so it's an interracial relationship too. And we killed the black gay guy.
Yeah.
It's like,
no, yeah.
Come on, that's just. I think, and I thought that was pretty well done until the final episode where it's like, okay, we're good now because it's the season finale and we have to be good now.
Well, they at least did drag it out to the end, but
but overall, right. I thought that was really good, especially with him back on the ship in a confrontation with the person who basically killed him, literally.
Yeah. And
seeing something like that, I mean, that's not the sort of thing that you would see on older versions of Star Trek, especially with the Saru, like, no, let this happen. This has to happen. We're going to do it here under control. Instead of letting it happen where no one's watching, we can keep it from getting too bad. But, Riker would just jump in and start throwing punches.
Riker would choose a side and just jump right in.
So I thought that was, I think that was a good choice to bring him back. They did the best they could with cleaning up a mess that they made in season 1 there, and I kind of thought that was a good thing.
I thought the way they brought him back was really good.
Right.
And I like the fact that they dealt with consequences. They didn't just have him come back and everything was okay.
They didn't just slot him right back in where he left. And,
they gave that character, that became that character's arc for the rest of the season, of him, having to adapt to being back and how he's different. And I thought the whole thing was great.
It wasn't the primetime directive, leave everything exactly how you found it.
Exactly. It's basically, it's the storyline that they've given Coulson on Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. like 3 or 4 times now, like over the course of the series run, where it's like he's had to go through basically like the same arc of, oh, I died, I'm back. What does this mean? Like, damn, just give the guy a break. But so let's talk a little bit about Picard, and then we'll wrap up.
Okay.
What did you think of that one?
I thought that it was a mixed bag.
Mm-hmm.
It was It was good to see it had the problem that a lot of things like this do, which it was stronger when it was banking on nostalgia than when it was banking on the original material.
I see what you mean. Yeah, I see what you mean.
Probably the episode that was the most fun was the one where they met Riker and Troy.
Oh, that's definitely my favorite episode of
the season. That's banking on what you knew before, not on the new material necessarily. And even that was a little bit spot on with how their one child had passed away and how it perfectly slots to the plot line that's going on now. But I mean,
if only we would have had robots, we could have saved his life.
Yeah, I mean the whole thing with Soji, that plot line took this. It was so much screen time and so little happened with it.
Yeah.
And that was, like I said, dragging it out. It got to the point where it's like, all right, I'm not caring anymore. It was interesting at the beginning when the first episode where she dies, but then there's another one. And we find out, but then there was no progress on that for 5 or 6 episodes.
Well, that's part of I mean that's the drawback of keeping things a mystery. You know what I mean? Because I think I did not care at all about anything that happened on that Borg cube until Picard showed up and met Hugh, and then I was like, oh, this is great. Up until then, all the stuff with Soji and the Romulans.
It was an interesting concept that they did almost nothing with.
Well, like you said, they waited too long. They dragged it out too long. I mean, we didn't even know what the Romulans were after for most of the series, and it's hard to get invested in the bad guys and are the good guys going to stop the bad guys when you don't even know what the bad guys are trying to do. It's tough. And it's and again, when they finally pay it off, it's oh, they're trying to stop evil robots from another dimension from, it's it just feels like, okay.
That's one of those moments where it's okay, wait, what?
Yeah. Well, and it's no matter what it was, it wouldn't have been good enough because they waited so long to reveal it and they put so much weight on that one reveal. And then it's oh, so it's just some Star Trek shit. It's just they just have to stop some Star Trek shit from happening.
And when you saw it on screen, did it look just a touch more comical than they intended, do you think, or more cartoonish? It didn't. When you saw the part it didn't have the gravity that you needed to pay off what they were trying to do there.
No,
it didn't look ominous. It looked.
I think what they tried to do there, and I think it was a wise attempt, but I think they probably just waited too late in the season to do it or to make the shift. Was the dramatic weight of that final, the build up to the evil tentacle aliens coming through the portal, they shift the weight of that from will the heroes stop the disaster from happening, will the heroes stop the monster from getting here, to Soji's decision and Picard appealing to her, and saying can you trust humans just enough to to help us avert this disaster? Can you believe in our potential, that we have the potential to do the right thing just enough to stop this? And
we weren't invested enough in the character to care.
Well, yeah, but it's a smart idea to put that on to make that scene about her instead of about, oh no, scary space monsters, because you're right, they do look kind of silly and just they're it's Star Trek, so it's hard to say that the idea is too silly because we've seen sillier stuff, but
thank you, Threshold.
It's but it's it was a smart idea. I just don't know if they completely were able to pull it off. Partially because it felt like a last minute turn, and they were like, "Oh shit, we've kind of lost Soji in this. We need to get back to her. And Picard." And
it's hard to build up an entire season to one event The whole concept of the season was preventing this from happening, but we didn't even know that this existed until 8 episodes out of 10.
Yeah, exactly. It's one of the
it took too long to. Yeah. But now, as far as Picard himself, I like I like that they did with the character. Honestly, I mean, people, that see, one of the frequent unrealities of Star Trek was that you could convince, especially Picard, could convince people to give up heartfelt, lifelong beliefs if he can give a righteous enough speech.
Right.
Sort of a Star Trek thing. You can talk people out of anything and into anything if you are right and you can be convincing enough about it. And that has always worked for Picard in the Next Generation and into the movies. And it's not exactly realistic, but it's the way Star Trek worked.
Yeah.
And now we get into this where he doesn't have the authority of Starfleet behind him anymore, and he's in a situation where people don't trust him anymore, and he doesn't know how to adjust to that because, and this can come off more negative than I intend, but in a way, Picard is a member of the 1%. He is the privileged elite.
He is
suddenly finding that he's not the privileged elite anymore, and what always worked for him doesn't work anymore. And and seeing him adjust to that was really, really one of the, in a way, sort of one of the highlights for me as far as the themes of the season. Like, when he was on the planet that he had been on all those years ago, and and he is like public enemy number one because they think he abandoned them, which in a way he did.
Yeah.
And he starts trying to do the righteous speech thing, and they're like, screw this, I'm going to kill you. Not
interested, yeah.
And he's not grasping that this isn't going to work. And then the person who's attacking him gets beheaded, and they beam back up to the ship, and he criticizes the person for for saving his life because he didn't like how he did it.
Yeah.
And seeing this dose of reality come into it, where you can't just talk people into not being angry anymore.
Yeah. And seeing in the last episode when he gives the inspiring speech again to Soji, but what ultimately sells it is his willingness to sacrifice himself. His action, not so much the eloquence of his words. It's it's the fact that he is willing to lose his own life for the cause that he believes in.
And he sort of realized that the episode with Riker and Troy, when he admits, Riker, I've bitten off more than I can chew.
Yeah.
But he realized that the old ways aren't working anymore. He is the sort of the dinosaur in the room. He's the person who still thinks that the old standards apply when they don't. And that was, in a lot of ways, that character arc for Picard was much more interesting than the actual plot line of the season.
Mm-hmm.
Because, I mean, at the end, I don't know what it is with the Soongs, they all look exactly alike for 200 years. But
I know. What is with that DNA?
But and Brent Spiner does the best that he can with it. I mean, it's not really, he's not playing a deep character or a deep role in any of this, even though he's playing several roles again. Yeah. But it was good to see him back. I think you had said that the goodbye between Picard and Data was sort of redundant because in a way we've already seen this.
Yeah.
I think in a way though, part of the motivation was to clean up the mess that was Nemesis and try to do some of these things correctly.
Yeah, and I know, and I've seen people say, because that was as much as I love that scene, and just judged in a vacuum, I think that's an absolutely perfect scene. It's so well acted and well written, and it's
even the CGI gorgeous. To make Brent Spiner 20 years younger was pretty good too.
Yeah, it's not. Yeah, I mean, it's an amazing scene, but what pulls away from it for me is the fact that we've been here before. And it's like it feels like, well, this is what the whole season has been building up to, and it's like we've been building up to saying goodbye to Data. We did that, we did that 18 years ago.
But again, I think that in a way that's sort of the symbolic of Picard needs to grow and move on.
Yeah.
And he hasn't moved on since Nemesis. He's still living it, sort of like Cisco in the first episode. You still exist here.
Exactly. People said that it gave Picard, because another part of Picard's character throughout the series was his feelings about Data and his grief about Data and his regret about losing Data, and so it allowed Picard to close that loop.
I really, the opening scene in 10 Forward was really a good scene. I really liked it. and the thought that Picard still has unresolved guilt about what happened and how it happened. I mean, it makes sense.
Yeah, it does. I know. That's one of the criticisms of the season that annoys me when people say like, "Well, since when does Picard care so much about Data?"
What?
As though, first of all, there were probably more Picard and Data episodes, as a duo than there were any other pairing of the main cast in TNG.
Plus,
And
all 4 movies were Picard and Data movies.
all the movies were Picard and Data movies. Yeah, and Picard, and even in Nemesis,
Beverly Crusher is there, but
yeah, in Nemesis, Picard is the last one of Data's friends to see him before he dies. It's Picard and Data.
In a movie so stupid where Picard uses his phaser rifle as a club and breaks it.
Right. I mean, they are. Like Data is who Picard is who Data says goodbye to.
You're not a damn Jem'Hadar.
Yeah. So there is a connection. There is a connection there. And it's like, why? I mean, I don't. Yeah. I do not get that that complaint. And also people saying, like, basically people who already wrote fanfic and they're just pissed that the show wasn't like their fanfic, because they're like, oh, Picard should have been the president of the Federation, or Picard should have been an admiral, and blah blah blah. It's like
it's much more interesting if Picard goes in an unexpected direction and has issues that he has to deal with, and not still the perfect representative of Starfleet spreading truth, justice, and the American way to the 4 corners of the galaxy.
It's the same thing. It's the same point that all the people who whined and pissed and moaned about Luke Skywalker and The Last Jedi missed. If you give a character regrets, you give them a story. If you give a character, especially if it's an older version of a character that we haven't seen for a while, they've lived a lot more of their life since the last time we caught up with them, and we find out, oh, they made some mistakes. They have some regrets. They have some things that they did that they wish they could change, but they can't. That gives you a story to tell with that character.
What people don't get is that people change over time.
Yeah. Yes. And nobody is perfect. And nobody, whether you're talking about real people or fictional people, nobody ever behaves 100% in alignment with their values. So when they say like with the Luke Skywalker example, when they say
perfect characters are boring.
Yeah. Well, and they say like, well, Luke would never have popped his lightsaber and even thought about killing Ben. And it's like, well, you're saying you don't think he ever would have? Like, you're saying he was perfect. He would never have made that mistake, because not only do you understand his nature, but you feel like he would never ever ever in any circumstance act contrary to that nature. Like, it makes no sense at all. You're complaining about something just to complain about it. And the same thing with Picard. When like, well, Picard would never have just retired and gone back to his vineyard. How the fuck do you know? He's he's an imaginary person. And even if real people do stuff that doesn't make any sense all the time.
And he's always thought family was very important. In generations, he found out there wasn't going to be any more family. This could be his sense of responsibility to the legacy of the Picard family and the Picard name. I mean, and that makes perfect sense, and that would be in character.
There's this idea, and Leonard Nimoy said it when people were complaining about the first reboot movie, and he said the attitude you want to have. You want to approach it with not, are they doing Star Trek right or are they doing Star Trek wrong? You want to approach it with the attitude of, what is Star Trek trying to show me? And that doesn't mean that you have to like it. Right. It doesn't mean
people don't get that I liked it or I didn't like it is not the same thing as it was good or it was bad.
Right. And you don't even, and you can think it's bad.
Something can be good and you don't have to like it. Something can be bad, but you enjoy it anyway.
That's true.
To an extent, I mean, some cases that's called guilty pleasure.
Yeah, that's true. But I mean, like, you can, and part of it is just, I guess it's a philosophical thing, or it's just the way I approach things. But like, I have always felt like it's important to give a story its starting premise. and just see where it goes from there. Even if the premise isn't something that you yourself would have written. Like, I used to argue with someone about The Dark Knight Returns. And they said, like, well, The Dark Knight Returns, I can't enjoy that because Batman would never retire. Okay, but what if he did? Like just give the story its starting point and see where it goes. And you can still decide that it's not good.
But that whole Batman would never retire is the same. Characters can't change over time.
Yeah, exactly. Picard would never retire.
Not only did I not have a problem with 7 of 9 in this, but I thought that in many ways she was more interesting in this than she ever was on Voyager.
My thought about it was, it is a far more interesting future for her than she would have gotten if Voyager had somehow run for 20 years. You know what I mean? Like you could not. And most Star Trek fans would probably have imagined, like, well, she's in Starfleet, or she's working on some project, or it's something completely fucking boring. And it's like, you never would have imagined her as like Han Solo out in the galaxy, you know?
She didn't have Starfleet values. She came back. She didn't like what Starfleet did. She's still a mess, and she's trying to sort out. She's trying to do what she thinks is right. And I like the fact that she struggled with who she was and what she was doing. I like the fact that she wasn't really sexualized at all in this show.
No.
And she was somebody who was in a bad situation and trying to do the best she could, even though she was fully aware that it might not even be making things better, but she was trying.
Yeah.
And I really liked that. I thought her connecting with the Borg ship should have been more dramatic than it was. But
I agree.
That's a plot complaint or a direction complaint, not a character complaint or an actress complaint. Because I think she did a really good job playing a very believable version of this character. And she didn't have to be in that ridiculous costume.
I thought
she was cynical. She was bitter. She drank, but she was believable.
Yeah, I thought her character and I thought Jerry Ryan's performance was one of the highlights of the season. I agree. I think most of the Borg stuff would have been better served if they had just given that its own season. I mean, one of my other problems with Discovery, with both seasons of Discovery and with Picard so far, has been that it feels like the writers just have too many ideas. Like they have. With Picard, they had 10 episodes. With Discovery, they had 15 and 13 episodes. And they are just so packed with ideas. And there's just no time. Like
if you do too much, you can't pay off any of it well.
Picard had the Romulan stuff and the android ban and all of that, and it's like that to me seems like plenty for 10 episodes of television. And then they throw the Borg stuff in on top of that, and it kind of fits together. They try to have like, well, the Romulans are on the Borg cube and blah blah blah. But I mean, it feels like, man, the Borg stuff just needs more room to breathe. Like if you want to do something with the Borg, because a lot of the Borg stuff I liked in theory. Like I like the idea that there are ex-Borg who are having trouble integrating into society, and people still look at them with suspicion, and which is basically racism. Yeah,
which is could be potentially a very powerful story if you had time to devote to it.
Yeah, well, it's just like what Hugh and Picard were talking about, where Hugh gives him that tour of the cube, and basically says to Picard, who is himself an ex-Borg. He says somebody should be telling our stories. Someone with your stature and your prestige in the Federation. You could be a powerful voice and a powerful advocate for ex-Borg, and to open people's eyes to the ways that we're mistreated. And Picard seems really receptive to that, and seems like he has like an epiphany about it that he never really thought of before. And then it's just kind of dropped because that's not what the season is about. And it's like, oh, that's such a powerful idea. And it's like, it's just kind of, we get it. And then it's like, well, time to move on.
And then, and Hugh was disposed of for almost no reason.
Yeah.
Which is just a waste. Well, they got the same actor back for him. They didn't get the same actor back for Maddox.
For Maddox or for Icheb.
Yeah. But as far as the new characters in Picard, what did you think of them?
I didn't not like any of them. I mean, some of them I like more than others, just because I feel like we got to know them a little more.
Like Picard's old friend who took the time and had parent or issues with the
Oh yeah,
child. I thought that
Raffi.
was a
Yeah.
really powerful scene, because again, in Star Trek, we have this belief that it's utopia and everything is perfect and everyone eventually gets along. And here we have like a child who has completely rejected their parent and isn't necessarily even wrong to do so.
Right. Well, and what I loved about that was I felt like that was a great way. That was an example of paying something off in a really satisfying way, and setting up an expectation and paying it off that you don't even necessarily realize they've done until it's paid off. Because when Raffi and Picard first meet each other, and then you get that little bit like the flashback and a little bit of their backstory, and you see that like Raffi is really pissed at Picard for quitting and abandoning her, and like her sort of taking her career down with him, but then she decides to help him anyway. And at first you're like, well, why is she helping him if she thinks he's a dick? And she blames him for her own downfall. And then you get that scene with her and her son and you realize, oh, she fucked up in her past and is hoping for a second chance. So Picard screwed her over. She's giving Picard a second chance, and it makes sense. And it's like, oh, and it's such a nice,
because she wants a second chance too,
right?
And she can't reasonably expect to get a second chance if she's not willing to offer one to people who have wronged her.
And they don't beat you over the head with it. They just put it in there so you can get it. Like, oh, that's why she's willing to forgive Picard, even just like her son has a reason to be pissed at her, she seems to have a totally legitimate reason to be pissed at Picard, but she's willing, and it's sad, and then it's sad because her son's not willing to do that for her, but he's probably totally justified.
Yeah, and I think that she probably was the best of the new characters, simply because she got the most screen time and you got to learn the most about her.
Yeah,
and as opposed, and the captain of the ship that they ended up on with all the holograms of himself.
Yeah, which was a cute gimmick. They were really creative with the way they use holograms, because that gimmick, and then also like all the pop-ups when they get to the planet, which is also
sort of, the holograms are sort of a nice end around beyond the AI ban too.
Right. Yeah. Holograms don't count. Sorry, Doc. Holograms still don't count.
But and then we eventually find out what his issue was with Starfleet, and of course it has to tie in perfectly as well. But still, you didn't learn quite as much about him, and the payoff for him sort of came out of the blue, so it wasn't quite as powerful, I don't think. But it still, they did it worked for what they were trying to do.
Oh yeah.
But overall, the whole season seemed to be a lot of build up without an appropriate payoff, is how I would describe most of season 1 of Picard.
I agree. Well, and they there was, and of course,
it's a fan service that Riker was leading the fleet at the end, because that's completely illogical, but you want to see him, and it works, Well, it works as a fan service thing,
They set it up a little tiny bit. I don't know if you could say they set it up, but they left the door open when, Riker sort of casually drops that he's still like basically on inactive reserve in Starfleet, so he hasn't totally retired. He's just kind of taken an extended leave of absence. So when he comes back at the end, it's not like it's completely
They didn't pull him out of retirement, but it wouldn't have been like Picard's only being put in charge of a fleet.
Right, exactly. It's like, okay, it makes some sense, but
Picard, again, he's the one who is expecting everything to be the way it was, where he goes into the Admiral's office and says, okay, I'm going to do this, and I need you to give me a ship, and I'm willing to concede to only be captain instead of admiral, and he thinks that's a big concession,
It's such a great scene, and then she's like, the fucking hubris. You come in here after like 20 years, and you're like, I need a ship? You can just make me a captain,
It's a Picard who's used to simply being able to get what he wants and can't get it anymore.
Yeah,
and I that was an aspect of the show that I really liked.
Me too.
Because and Star Trek doesn't go that route, because again, Roddenberry wanted the utopian ideal, and they're not doing that anymore.
No, which I think is good. I mean,
Right.
you know, we've had 50 years of that, and a lot of it was fantastic, but you know,
But yeah,
it's
again,
it's okay to move in different
I've
directions.
said it repeatedly. Between the Next Generation and Voyager and Enterprise, they did the same show for 18 years, and it's time to move on.
Yeah.
People who are upset that the show isn't what it was aren't grasping the show needs to grow and evolve and move on. You know, the Next Generation wasn't the original
No.
series. Discovery and Picard are not going to be the Next Generation,
No. Well, not only
and they
that. I
can't be,
mean, not only that.
and they shouldn't be.
The movies weren't the original series. Like that's the thing that, and I know this happens. You know, every fandom and every generation goes through this. You know, and Star Wars obviously has gone through it as well, where you know people act like what is happening now, the thing that they're complaining about is the first time that this has ever happened, and it's actually like the third or fourth time it's happened. They just didn't notice it because, you know, maybe by the time they came into the franchise, it had already happened the first three times, and they just took it as part of the whole. You know, because like when yeah, I mean, God, look at the tone and the aesthetic and the style of classic Star Trek on TV, and compare that to Star Trek: The Motion Picture. I mean, like there's other than the fact that they use this, they have the same names for stuff, and it's mostly the same actors. It's completely different.
Yeah, I mean, the motion picture is also the only time that they went realistic with the ship is not going to be lit from outside.
Right? Yeah, it lit itself. Yeah.
That's why there were so many lights on the outside of the ship. Why the ship is so dark, but it's the only Star Trek property that looks like that because they were trying to go a somewhat different route, you know, and a more realistic one. You know, so yeah.
So
Star Trek has changed over time, and it's going to continue to change. And at some point, it's going to be something completely different than what it is now. But this is what we've got at the time, and just enjoy the damn show.
Well, yeah, or
just you know what came before should be the foundation for what they're doing now. It shouldn't be treated as an anchor.
Yeah, judge it and like it or don't like it on its own merit. Don't automatically dislike it because it's different from what came before. I think that's the anchor that people are tying around their own feet. You know, it's like you're making it such a barrier, you know, because it's like, well, but it's different. Okay, maybe
maybe
yeah, and you know what? Maybe it's different. It could be terrible. It could also be good. It has not the fact that it's different. Like people have I said this when I reviewed the first season of Discovery. People who are making a TV show have the right to make their show. You know, they don't have to go and remake someone else's show because you think that's how it should go. You know, if they had wanted to do a remake of classic Trek and have everything look exactly the same and have the multicolored cardboard sets and the costume, if they had wanted to do that, they could have done that. It would have been completely within their right to do it. They chose not to do it.
That's what 24 different fan series have done.
It's like, if you want to watch Star Trek Continues, go watch it. It's right there, you know? Yeah.
Well, we've gone longer than normal here because it's been so long since we've done one.
Yeah,
I blame you.
I knew as soon as we started talking about Star Trek, we weren't going to get done anytime soon. But and also, I think it helps me with. It helps that I have for many years I have read and enjoyed the Gold Key Star Trek comics because those are completely fucking. They're
awful, aren't they?
They're completely out.
I showed you the one compilation when the last time we saw each other was when I got married and you were the best man. So that was 2012. That's the last time I've been in the same room together. Yeah. And I showed you that I had the one compilation that I got when I was like, I don't know, 8 years old, and it's in terrible shape, but I still have it.
I've been reading them. I have one of them in paperback, but I've been reading them on my Kindle. I've been getting them through Comixology, and it's like, well, I think because the story is like the artist had never seen the show and only had
he had a couple of publicity stills, but he didn't actually have the set. So, and they didn't even the book I have. It's like issues 8 through 14 or something, and they don't even put Scotty in red until the last issue, and somebody finally realized that. Well,
they have.
I think is that the one that wraps up with Spock is teasing Scotty, and Scotty is actually threatens to fight him until Kirk comes up and tells them that if they keep at it, they're going to be wiping pipes in the nuclear furnace room.
I love it. I love it. And I mean, there are things in it that I'm totally stealing for my photo comics, for my action figure comics, because like, especially I actually, you know, that panel that I shared a couple of days ago where it has, you know, the 45th president of the United States, and it's Anton York, and it's like, oh, that's not canon. But I actually went back to the script that I've written for a future one of my comics, and I rewrote the ending to include a reference to Anton York because I wanted to put that in there because I thought, like, you know.
I will say I help out with the Whirlpool stuff, and I've written the Steven stuff. You know, I've got you know, another script that I haven't completed because this life happened.
Yeah.
But I'll get back to that. I'll tell you, when you were doing Justice Friends, I was happy to work with that. I really have no interest in writing a Star Trek comic. I just feel that the comics that you're writing on that are your own thing and your own vibe, and I just don't feel like I can step into that, and I don't even want to try.
They're so much fun to do. They are so much fun. I released one today, and it was episode 56 or 54.
Yeah.
It was episode 54. I have written up through like episode 70 something, and I have like plots for past episode 100. Like I have like so many.
You did the video where you showed how that worked.
How to make one.
And I pointed out that you actually, the one panel sticks out like a little bit below the border, and you didn't fix it. So.
Oh, I didn't? I must have missed that. Yeah, I don't think I.
It's only one pixel. I mean, who's going to notice?
Yeah, I don't think I never even noticed that. But yeah, there's so much fun to do, and it's fun to write Riker as such an asshole.
It looks like some of them you have way more dialogue than you have room for. Some of them got kind of wordy.
That's a challenge. What I decided to do was I decided to write them sort of in runs. And then after a run, there'll be like a couple of standalones, and then go into another run. So the story.
So what you can do is you're saying that you're writing this by the Neil Gaiman Sandman method.
Exactly. So they're or like
just to build you up a little bit.
The Marv Wolfman Legion of Superheroes method. Yeah, so and like because there's an ongoing storyline in it right now with Ducat, and then that'll last I think 2 more episodes, and then that'll be wrapped up, and then there are like several standalone episodes, and then another storyline starts. And when it's in when it's in like a story arc, you know, I have to not just worry about being funny, I also have to advance a plot. Which is fun. Like I'm doing it on purpose. Like I don't have to write it that way. I could just have it be goofy, you know, every single time. But like I wanted it to be like to still attempt to do something resembling a Star Trek story while also having it be completely bonkers.
Sure.
And so, you know, I don't think any of the other ones coming up are as dialogue heavy as the one I posted the other day, where it's like where there are a couple of panels where it's like their
almost
heads,
all words.
It's their heads and then text. But I realized that for the plot to make sense, I had to throw a couple of details in, you know, so because otherwise I thought like, well, wait a minute, you know, why aren't they out in another ship like chasing after the Enterprise, or you know, like I had to throw some stuff in to explain, like, or you know, or I wanted to have Garrick come in and make an appearance, which he does, but then the first draft I wrote of it, Garrick doesn't really do anything, like he's just kind of there, and then he makes he does his joke where he asks Captain Sisko if he can come back and live on DS9 again because Cardassia is such a shithole after the Dominion War, and I thought, okay, I want to keep that, but like why did they bring Garrick out in the first place? So I had to rewrite it so that Garrick actually makes a suggestion that helps them, gives them an idea for how to defeat Ducat, and that made it kind of dialogue heavy.
Yeah, but like I said, I mean, I'm enjoying them, but I have absolutely no urge to write those. And if you start doing Justice Friends again, I'll be right there. But which is essentially what you're doing now with Star Trek characters instead of DC characters.
Yeah, it's Star Trek Friends. Yeah, it's Star Trek Friends.
But yeah, this I'm stepping back, but it doesn't seem like something that I would even even if I wanted to, I don't think I'd have the voice of it, but I'm just not interested. This is yours. That's why you're having so much fun with it, and I'm just staying out of the way on it. You know?
Well, I'm glad you're enjoying it. I'm glad that other people are enjoying them too, because they're so much fun to write. I mean, they're just a gas, you know.
But I'll stick around being a primary contributor to Whirly and an ancillary one to Steven's stuff, because I think I've written one episode.
Which, by the way, we're in. I think I finally, and we can talk about it for a couple of minutes when we get off the air. But I feel like I finally have an ending for this season of the Whirlpool, which is nice that we have 2 episodes to go, and I think I finally figured out where it's going to end. So, you know.
Yeah, we didn't have. COVID became the running story by necessity rather than by design.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean looking back on it, it's not as bad as I was afraid it was at first, because like the first half had a little bit of a thread with, you know, the radio host gig where he wanted the job at the radio station and then he didn't get it, and then the second half has been the part that has felt a little bit more unfocused because of COVID and because I wasn't quite sure exactly where it was going to end up, but now I think I've got it. So.
Yeah, I had just a couple of throwaway ideas for the second season, and you went through them pretty quick, and I'm like, oh, awesome. But, you know, now what?
Exactly. That's writing, baby. You got to come up with some new shit.
Well, anyway, we're well over 2 hours now, so I think we should wrap up the broadcast part of this.
Yeah, we should.
Been fun. Yeah. Sorry that it took so long. You know, I don't even really have an excuse because I haven't left home much, you know. It's not like I've been out and doing things. But I mentioned a couple times that you had schedule conflicts with other things that you were doing, but then I don't know what happened. I just stopped asking.
I can't remember. Like, I don't know, but but we'll have to make sure that it's not like 4 months or 3 months, I guess it was, from one show to the next. But yeah, so thanks for watching, everybody. Stay safe. Please don't send your kids to school if you're in the United States. Especially
wear a mask.
Wear a mask. Please, God, wear a mask.
It's such a simple thing that makes such a big difference.
Yeah, so just do it.
And we appreciate the fact that you still watch us.
Yeah, we appreciate it. I don't, for whatever reason. I mean, it's not for Pierre. I know that. Anyway.
Thank you, and hopefully we'll see you. Hopefully we'll do another episode in August.
August, yeah. Well, that would be nice. Or maybe October. I don't know. All right. Thanks for watching, everybody. We'll see you.